EMS, yes. Yeah, I found it, I think it was,
But they're
just
not
for
right
under.
now. They're better now. They're better now than they were, but, yeah, and
It's weird too, but also like when people deal with documents and they try to, it's just a different system. So even if
It
you're
is
going
too,
back
yeah.
and forth, it's just easier.
Right.
Everything to work with
right,
everything.
that you're gonna.
I
be
always
able to-
send all my documents as PDFs,
This
just
just makes it
because
easier.
it makes it easier.
I know. That way everybody kind of has access to it.
Unless I really know someone has Word or something like that. Okay.
Attached above.
Makes a lot like, yeah, we're on. Yeah,
NS4.
it's right here.
Okay, where's my NS4?
Thank you so much, Mike. Yeah, I think I got everything else that you needed. You guys have been super helpful, thank you.
Then safety.
I don't see that attached, do you?
What?
Are you looking for the additional backup item?
What are you looking at?
I don't know what they do, but
The
yeah.
additional backup item,
Wanna push it and find out?
Kind of.
item
Not
3,
really.
attached above. Oh,
We had attachments.
yeah.
What? Oh, no, I don't, I saw that, and
I
I feel
can't
like it's
hear
just like
you
a
'cause of
stop
your
safe or
mask.
something. I don't know what it is, it's not, but.
That's a different one.
What?
The other attachments are from a prior email.
Okay, are we all?
What
Getting-
attachments
we
are
all-
you talking about?
We all ready?
One is
Okay. All right, well then, let's go ahead and call to order this
When
meeting
did
of
we
the
get that?
Sustainability Committee of the City of Tarpon Springs this Thursday, June 17th at 6 PM. Can we please get a roll call?
Chairperson Dory Larson,
Present.
Vice Chairperson Paul Robinson,
Here.
Member Taylor Mandalou,
Here.
Member Denise Menino,
Here.
Member Karen Gallagher,
Here.
Member Robin Sanger,
Here.
Member Carol Mickett.
Here.
All right, so our first order of business on the agenda is a discussion on procedures. And so I wanted to quickly talk through setting up kind of a new way of doing the research. So if you are interested in pulling an item that you want to have in the Sustainability Action Plan, and we have conversation about it, and you suggest, I think we should XYZ, then I propose that you would also do the research to track that down. So for example, Taylor, you were interested in looking at botany and how we can protect plant species in addition to animals. So you are working on that, and I appreciate that. And then Dr. Robinson, you were interested in the air quality and wanting to run that idea down further. So you took it upon yourself, and you're researching that. There were a couple things that came up during the last meeting, and I don't know that they all did get researched, so that's kind of why I wanted to bring it back up. I know that Paul Smith did quite a bit of running down some of the questions that we had, but I'd like to propose that going forward, that if you want to advocate for something, like for example, I'm going to talk tonight about health and all policies as one of the items. So I had spent some time contacting the city of St. Pete, and also Pinellas County has a health and all policies policy now as well. So do we need a discussion on that? Do you guys, is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
All right, well then that was a really quick item number 1.
And I've been working on waste,
Excellent.
yes.
And so I guess, just to finish that up, so that when you do have something, that also you make sure to, all of the backup materials that you want sent to all of the rest of the committee, that goes through Ashley's to make sure that we can all have it kind of ahead of time. That was what I was trying to do with the health and all policies. It's hard because you don't want to like be just buckshot giving people resources all the way through the month, because then it kind of gets lost. And it is hard to try to research all of this stuff like the week before we have our meeting, but I don't really know another way to make that happen so that it's concise and all in one place, that we can all be looking for it. So at any rate, if you do want to have something on the next item or the next meeting, just to make sure to get it at least 2 weeks before the meeting so that Ashley has time to put it together and then distribute it out to the rest of the committee.
Come a time when, and that could have happened with the information on air quality, when it would be appropriate for us to form a subcommittee, ad hoc, transient, whatever, for really researching something in depth. In fact, in the case of air pollution, I did not have to use other physicians to run this, with the exception of a guy who's a member of FCCA in Jacksonville. But what would be the official way of saying, look, I need to bring in some people in the community or in the state and really form a subcommittee to run this down and continue to look at it?
That's a good question. I don't know that they wouldn't be a subcommittee of our committee.
Yeah, it would be.
Well, they're not members of our committee.
Well, I know that Public Art has done this. They were looking at using a private location in the city for a piece of art, and as it turned out, it didn't fall. It fell through because of the owner's concerns about privacy, but in fact, it was an official subcommittee, I understand, of that city committee. It was not composed. It was composed of only one member of the Public Art Committee, but there was in fact subcommittee, just as one example.
I don't know procedurally like anything in terms of how we would go about doing that. So I guess let's just talk that through. I mean, I think if you want to do that outside research, like I'm sure Taylor's contacting other people and Denise, you're contacting, and I contacted Cassidy with, City of St. Pete. That, I don't know, do we need to like disclose all of that? I don't think that we do. I think that that's just kind of overkill. I think that we would just want to, when you're updating our committee, explain like who you had the conversation with and kind of the conclusion that y'all reached as a group.
I'm just thinking forward to, let's say we want to educate the public to a certain topic, and we feel that there is a body of knowledge that exists in people outside this committee, in the community, or even outside the community, that would be very helpful for a period of time. So that person or those people might logically become part of a subcommittee under the auspices of this committee.
I'd like to get some thoughts from the rest of the committee about what you guys are thinking.
Yeah, I think that if there's a special interest area, an area of special interest that you'd like to bring in outside information, whatever, or continued collaboration with an outside group, that what it would be appropriate would be to just inform this committee of, as you go along, give them updates on the progress of the group that you're calling together, just to further whatever item that you're interested in, whatever subject, whatever that relates. And then if there's if the group, at some point, y'all want to have a special presentation to this committee that's regarding that topic and say, I'd like to have, 10 minutes on the agenda because these people I've been working with, I think would have some insights, and maybe call them in at a specific group, but it seems that it would be your subcommittee rather than this committee's, a subcommittee of the committee. It would be your personal interest and pursuing further information or collaboration as a parallel to this committee.
Like an informal informational group session, something that is a collaboration? Are you thinking of like an ongoing subcommittee that meets on a regular basis type
Yeah,
of thing?
ongoing,
Like,
I think, is the key word.
So a committee, just for clarification, basically a group of people who's working on whatever this special interest portion is
A particular topic, sure.
on a particular topic. So I don't know how that works. I don't know, like, is that considered a formal subcommittee, or is that more an informational, I don't know. That's why I'm asking, because I really don't know the answer to that. Is it a formal subcommittee, and are we able to form?
I think that's the
formal
question.
And are we able to form formal subcommittees?
And I
know the
don't
answer
see
to
why
that.
we would not, but the only limitation I see to this would be if two members of this committee formed a subcommittee, then you'd get into sunshine law problems, possibly. But if it's people from outside this committee with one member of the committee, I don't see how that could be a problem.
Not even thinking sunshine laws as much as we're an appointed committee by the Board of Commissioners. Are we then able to appoint our own subcommittees? I don't know the answer to that. I wish, and I don't even know who to ask that.
In my experience, it takes the chairman of a given committee to appoint a subcommittee, period, the end.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
Let's hear
it's
from
pretty easy.
Kara.
And that's
So,
a good point.
on boards that aren't, boards that I sit on, outside of the city, subcommittees are formed all the time with people who aren't on the official board. And they're formed not by voting for them, and they're formed in order to bring people into the discussion and to see how they may potentially be members of the commission. And any subcommittee, people who are members of the subcommittee, they don't get to vote. So one of the reasons we all have to be appointed by the commission seems to be because we get to vote, and we get to go in front of the commission, and we have some official capacity, whereas the people in the subcommittees really won't, other than the person who's on the committee, who's part of that subcommittee. I think it's a really good idea because it brings in more people to the discussion and more people to be with expertise to be focused on Tarpon. And it seems as though it shouldn't be an issue at all. Probably we should run it by who, the lawyer?
The attorney, I would think the city attorney just asked a
And
quick
just
question.
ask, but I don't see any conflict of interest. I think that Paul's right, you can't have two of us on the committee because of sunshine laws, or any other, I don't know, maybe any other appointed person, like they have to be completely out. But I think it's a really good idea to get more people actively engaged and people who have expertise, because we need that.
Okay, so what if we just seek clarity on like the procedure to make it happen? I agree that it would be good to be able to bring more ideas to our committee and to be able to have those kind of discussions. My only concern is I don't want to pull time away from like completing this action plan. So I don't want to have like our 2 hours, an hour and a half of it, our subcommittee presentations, you know what I mean? And then we're not focused on getting this done. So I think that maybe if we like limit it to like 1 per or 2 per meeting.
Paul, what were
And-
you thinking?
Yeah.
What type of subcommittee were you inclined to form?
Well, I was asking a general question, and it's it's fairly common in the boards and committees I've been on, for subcommittees focusing on a specific question to do a lot of the work of the of the overarching committee, and simply report back at the next meeting or the meeting after that. And that's the way a lot of the work of committees and boards gets done. In the case of this particular committee or any city committee, I just use an example of the question of air quality. It might become useful going forward for a transient ad hoc subcommittee with people with different kinds of specialties and experience to share their ideas in meetings which are not official city meetings, but just happen between the times of this committee. Now, community outreach of various kinds could cause the creation of different kinds of subcommittees.
So what I think that we're hearing, like, consensus seems to be like that we're in favor of this idea. I just want to put like some parameters, like I said, about like the time and the amount of, like, you know what I mean? So we're not just completely consuming our meetings with them. And then also maybe some way of like indicating to the rest of the committee, like, hey, I'm gonna work on this so that we're not both, we don't have two members doing the same thing, and then it could create a conflict with Sunshine. So maybe put together like a list of like parameters, like we're talking about, to include making the rest of the committee aware of what you're like,
Correct.
what you're trying to work on, and then with the understanding that if they do come to present to the whole sustainability committee, that it would be like maximum of 2 per monthly meeting, and then it would have a time frame of like a 10 to 15 minute presentation. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes.
Yes. I think the main, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The main thing is, it would be good to know, for us all to share that information, so that we all have the same information of what is being discussed on the side, not just for our own enlightenment, but also if it's something that I might know the person who might also want to connect with that subcommittee, or suggest a resident who might be interested in engaging, say, there's a subcommittee that you might be interested, why don't you talk to Paul Robinson and see what they're doing, something like that. But and especially I would support it if it's aligned with the work that we're doing too. Like you just mentioned, air quality, that would be perfect. We're talking about that issue. The more information we have about it, the better. So, I mean, that ties right in.
Okay. So I don't think that we need a motion or anything for this. It's just procedurally, if that's what we'll.
Yeah, it's a procedural question.
Right. So I just want to make sure, I mean, like, I don't see why we would have, like, why our committee wouldn't be able to do that, but maybe we should just not make sure that we're getting ourselves in any legal trouble with the city attorney. But I don't see why, if Public Art's doing it, then I don't see why we couldn't. So.
I would say let us as staff research this and get back to you all, and we can get back to you with an email, all of you, before the next meeting, so that at least you have something to go forward with next time. I just read through the resolution, the enabling resolution, to see if there's any mention of subcommittee, and there's not. So that would be the first place I would look. So I'll talk to the clerk and the city attorney and the city manager as needed to get clarification. I do know for sure, though, that it would have to be just one member of the committee. Otherwise, you do get into sunshine law, but I want to find out if there's more to it than that.
All right. So now moving on to discussion item number 2, which is the follow-up of Natural Systems 4, outdoor air quality. So Dr. Robinson, you were researching more on that?
Well, let me just open the floor for questions, because you all should have received a keynote slide set, which I had intended to use and obviously did not. So if that brought up questions, or if there are questions hanging all over from last meeting, have at it. Robin did ask at the last meeting about the air quality monitoring site in Holiday. And that is, in fact, is on Darlington Road, and it is run by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. In fact, it is run by the Division of Air Resource Management. So it's in Pasco County, but it's not run by Pasco County. I tried to get more information by doing a chat with an individual named Catherine at Air Resource Management. I didn't get very far. I still want to ask the question of how come you are only looking at ozone at that site? And I don't have the answer to that question yet, but I'm going to pursue it again.
Thank you.
So I guess then, like, just to move this one along, the proposal is adding in local action number 1 under NS4, outdoor air quality. Did I say NS1? I meant NS4, outdoor air quality. Local action 1, conduct a study to evaluate the geographic areas and some populations with the highest exposure to outdoor air pollutants, particularly in consideration of environmental justice and equity impacts. So, I mean, at this point, I guess I'm where I'm at is just let's add it in to the Sustainability Action Plan recommendations at this point, and then when we, take it out to community for community feedback, we can.
I have a question, Paul, about the graph on page 8, where we have 3 colored lines.
I can't hear you, and
Oh.
I'm not looking at it, so,
Oh, well, there's an average air quality index,
yeah.
and it's a graph with Tarpon Springs, Florida, and the U.S. And the lines are going down in 2009. Is it better to have a high number or a low number? Do you know?
If it's the graph that I'm thinking of, it showed an improvement, yeah.
Okay, so as
showed
it
an
goes,
improvement in our air quality over time.
okay,
And it showed that Tarpon Springs was above the Florida mean air quality index, but below the U.S. mean air quality index.
correct. So does that mean that the Florida mean air quality index indicates Florida is better than Tarpon?
Yeah, yes, it
Oh, okay,
does.
so the lower number's the better number,
That's correct.
okay. Because it can't read what the axes are for on the left. Thank you.
So any other discussion about that? Are we okay with leaving that in or adding it into the plan? Okay. And then the other item, just to wrap up NS Natural Systems, Paul Smith was researching NS4 about burning.
Yes, thank you. I put it in your backup. I found through MuniCode, which is the same website you can use to research the city codes, also has Pinellas County on there. And I found the applicable section in their code 58, and I copied all of you on that, and I highlighted areas I thought would be of interest to you. I'll just go through them briefly. There's a definition of open burning. It's pretty broad. Any outdoor fire, open combustion, which produces or may produce air pollution. There are penalties, either fine or jail time or both. I thought it was important to note on page 2, 58-208, all territory within the legal boundaries of the county, including all incorporated and unincorporated areas shall be embraced by this article. So, here in the city, we have those requirements upon us as well. There's an intent by the Board of Commissioners that open burning be conducted in a manner that will reduce or eliminate the deleterious effect of air pollution caused by open burning. So the intent is there. Any open burning not specifically allowed by this article is prohibited. On page 4, section 58.215. Thank you, Ashley. Open burning in connection with industrial, commercial, or municipal operations is prohibited. And on the last page, it was asked about enforcement, and enforcement is either through law enforcement or the fire departments that have jurisdiction in the area. So there is the ability to enforce these requirements locally as well. That's a summary of what exists now at the county.
Means that it's illegal to burn yard waste, which I know some of my neighbors do. But in Tarpon, there's no need to, because every Monday it gets picked up. So it is strange that someone would burn it when
Well,
the
I will
city's so
say,
good about picking it up.
if you, on page 3, it does allow burning of wooden material or vegetation generated by a land clearing operation. And it does give, it says permit required though. This is, I think, more of a larger scale
Yeah.
application.
On,
But
on page 5, at the very bottom, it says, it defines yard waste. And then under prohibitions, it clearly states,
Right. Yard waste.
yard waste is prohibited. So, Carol, you can have your neighbors arrested.
Yeah, well,
So it just becomes a code
Yeah, I think
enforcement
I'll
They
issue.
go to
pass
jail
on
for
that
60
one.
days.
But it might be handy to send it out. I don't know,
Send it out.
to neighbors.
You can
So they
print
know.
it, print it out
Just
and
don't
give
know.
it to the person that's the guilty
Well, there-
party.
there's
But if
been
you're
a
printing it,
kerfuffle
that's
in
not
our neighborhood
sustainable.
about this. So,
Okay, so I think we've put that topic to rest. It's not cool to burn your stuff in Tarpon, folks at home, and code enforcement can be called upon you if you do, so don't do it. You've been warned. All right, the next topic, then I think that is the last topic for natural systems. So moving on to item number 3, which is the continued discussion on health and safety preferences. So we've got a couple of things that we wanted, that we were researching and getting back to everybody on. So I'll kick us off with the health and all policies. I asked Ashley to send around the resources on health and all policies that were provided to me by St. Petersburg's health and all policies coordinator. So it's just a quick video that I'm going to have her show, and then we can quickly discuss if we have questions or comments about that.
individual behavior, or even access to health care. The environments in which we live, work, and play have the greatest impact on our health. To build a healthy community, it all starts with our environment. We need healthy food, clean air and water, parks for recreation and play, safe transportation for people on foot or bicycle, or in cars or transit, tobacco-free places, indoors and out, affordable homes close to daily needs, communities that are safe and free from violence, jobs and opportunities to invest in our future, healthy schools where our kids can learn and succeed, a feeling of connection with our neighbors, and a strong sense of community. Our health is affected by the places we live, work, and play. But how can we create healthy environments? Experts like the CDC agree that the best way to achieve health is by changing environmental factors. And to create change, there must be policy. Policies provide the framework for building healthy environments. Policies put healthy foods in neighborhoods by financing grocery stores and cutting red tape for farmers markets. Policies create parks and well-maintained places to play. Policies make it possible for us to safely walk or bike to meet our daily needs. Policies ensure we can breathe air free from toxic secondhand smoke. Policies create affordable housing and ensure that our homes are safe and healthy. Policies can promote public safety through well-lit streets. Policies make sure that jobs are accessible by transit and pay a living wage. Policies support healthy schools that kids can walk and bike to, that serve nourishing foods, and that offer spaces where the whole community can play. Individual policies can improve our health in many ways. For example, laws designed to curb tobacco use have saved millions of lives. However, policy doesn't often take health into account. We have made uncoordinated changes to our environment through isolated policies, which prevents us from solving our biggest challenges, such as violence, poverty, chronic disease, and climate change. For example, a Parks and Recreation department might build a new park, which raises the price of nearby homes. When park policy is disconnected from housing policy, some residents won't be able to stay in their homes. Or the Transportation Department may expand a roadway, which increases the number of cars on the road. Without a policy to design streets for people to safely walk, bike, and drive, community leaders miss opportunities to reduce congestion and improve health. What if we could change it, working together to tackle our biggest problems? What would it look like? It would mean a new approach, health in all policies. You might call it sustainability or wellness in all policies, or even equity in all policies. But it all means one thing: bringing public agencies together around a common goal. We must adopt a new approach that changes how we make decisions so that everyone is working together to build stronger, healthier communities. This approach requires leaders from public agencies to convene and collaborate, to engage the community and create a vision for a healthier community, to make a plan for how we achieve this vision, to implement that plan by investing in change, and to track progress to see what has been accomplished and what we still need to do. Join the movement to create healthier communities. Visit our website to learn more.
Okay, so basically the idea is that that for this particular local action, the statement is adopt a health and all policies statement or
Welcome
a
to
policy.
the training on public health law, past and present, offered by the Public Health Law Academy. This training is brought to you by Change Lab Solutions and the Center.
No worries. Okay. So the idea is just that we would, in the Sustainability Action Plan, want to have the local action of adopting a health and all policy statement or a policy commitment for local decision making. So when we're expanding a road, we make sure that we put sidewalks in or bike paths, or, if we're putting in a new development, we're also looking at, how the flooding would impact, like if it pools and creates opportunities for vector-borne diseases, or if we're putting in new, something new downtown, maybe we would add in cooling stations also to address it. So to me, it's kind of like pulling together all of the different parts of the STAR framework in one statement about wanting to make sure that when we're making decisions, we're factoring all of these components into the equation.
So St. Pete is using this?
St. Pete has they have a resolution, and I can share the resolution with you guys as well.
That's in conjunction with them already having their integrated sustainability
Correct.
plan.
Right. So they adopted a resolution that they would implement health and all policies. Pinellas County has also done the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So they've recently made a health and all policies statement. And then St. Pete actually has a person whose sole job is to implement health and all policies.
The way in which we got into this question last time was because Carol suggested that we, even though Action 10 did not get 4 votes, that we adopt Action 10. And the discussion moved in the direction of, instead of implementing a comprehensive program, that we implement an education program. on vector-borne diseases. It was your suggestion that we might adopt Action 3, which is a health and all policy statement, instead of Action 10. And what the conversation focused on last time was that Action 3 is very general and very nonspecific, and Action 10 is very specific. I don't know if anybody else feels this way, but when I read this thing and health and all policies, it's redundant, it's tautological, and deep down inside, it's superficial. It doesn't really say anything new that basic good management wouldn't cover. So I don't like anything in here because I think it's gibberish. But that wasn't the question. The question is, should we substitute that for Action 10? I think Carol's suggestion is correct. We should adopt Action 10.
Any other thoughts?
I thought, even though you may refer to it as gibberish, it might be exactly the level that reaches the average person. So there must be some way, because it's a great education and perspective for someone who doesn't understand why any of this is of value, you know?
What did you get specifically out of this?
I think it's the way that it is simplified, the way that it simplifies the concepts of sustainability and makes them palatable to the average person. So that's general, it's not specific, but I thought that the value is in, you know, once we start doing community engagement and outreach, you want to be able to present things in a way that the average person who has not even considered this for a second might understand, you know, that we're all trying to achieve a better quality of living for everyone, and it's comprehensive. But, you know, I wouldn't say that it would be something that overrides in any way sustainability plan, but it's just kind of the public-facing simplification, and it might be usable at, you know, in that way
I think,
to educate.
just my opinion, I think that if you give people who don't understand the concepts of sustainability something this general and undefined, it turns them off. If you give them something specific that they can focus on, they engage. Just my experience.
It's
Plastic
my
straws
personal,
are not going to save the world or kill it, but it's something physical that people can focus on, like vector-borne diseases.
it's my experience when I read these things. If I get this general vague thing, I just sort of start glassing over because I don't know what it means. It's like, well, what does that mean? And it is, I mean, of course I agree with Paul. I mean, I think that when it's specific, I know how to move into action. I think that's part of it. Okay, so I'm going to focus here. I know how to do the next step. So I think more specifics is always needed. Or you give the general and then say, for example, A, B, and C. So people have an idea of what we mean. I mean, I need that when I read policies often. I think, I don't know what that means. So if I had specifics, it would help me.
Well, you might take a look at the Change Lab solutions. I downloaded the PDF just to get an idea, because this is a 3-minute video that's just a very light presentation, but they're also, went right into another video that I watched at home that was an hour and a half hosting more of a discussion from different interest groups that were involved with sustainability, and I think that they're doing them on a regular basis now. They just started the first one in April. So I was just planning on looking at it a little bit more. I only had today that I started looking at this at all, but I wouldn't just completely say that it was worthless. I think that there, you know, I'm going to continue to look at it a little bit at a deeper level. Read their PDF and from Change Lab Solutions, and then look at some of the other videos and the way that the public that had different interests from different groups that were interested, and they asked for, you know, what your interest was in being part of the discussion, and they had a Zoom call evidently that was recorded, and it was a discussion kind of like what we hosted initially when we were trying to get community response and partners.
Where are you, what are you talking about? What site are you talking about?
Change Lab Solutions. It's the...
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah,
The handouts we received.
right.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's what I thought.
Any other thoughts?
So,
Yes.
go ahead.
No, go ahead, Taylor.
Oh, so are we kind of proposing that we put like the health and all policies in the plan? Is that what we're talking about right now?
I would like to see it in, but obviously it's not a unanimous decision at this point.
Yeah, I think it's good. It's kind of like how we want to see, or how we want to put a lens of sustainability on the city, like it's what we're trying to do, and the health is like involved with that. And yeah, it was just a light presentation, so it didn't go into specifics. I feel like there's probably already a lot of that already going on, but it might be good to have like a set person or a policy saying to like kind of look for those things.
Yeah, I think that I understand everyone's point of view. The things that stand out that are most significant for me is how do you put things into policy? How do you get things from your idea and get it as part of the city's policy? Which I would love to see how they do that, how they translate their ideas and how they support this work and transform it into city ordinances and policies, and just see the roadmap that they use. I do like the idea of collaboration, the idea of, it's so easy to unintentionally work in silos. So if the overarching theme is this whole city unit is working together and we're trying to codify our ideals of what a sustainable community would be and how that would look in the city, it would be easier for people to ponder when something comes up. Is this part of that? Am I contributing to this collective health and all policies? You know, or at least getting them to think about it. You know, is this having it in the awareness, I think, is helpful. For example, you know, we talked about when I think it was Tom Funchen was here talking about using Roundup, and that they're using less of it. But if there's a way to have an overarching policy that we know that I forget the name of what Roundup is, but whatever that
Poison.
yeah, whatever the
Glyphosate.
whatever that stuff is that they find everywhere now in people's food, and every cereal and everything has this in it, it would at least have a way to coordinate throughout the city. You know, do people not use it in their yards, not use it on our plants, to do, you know, weeding in the city rather than spraying this stuff, that it's dangerous to kids, that it's dangerous to pets. And, you know, we want to have green space and walkable community, but do you want to walk where they've been spraying with pesticides, or have your pet walk, or have your child crawl in the grass? I mean, so I think this could contribute to our overall vision. I understand that this is really, really vague, but I think there's some good stuff in here. And because it's encouraging holistic thinking, which is difficult. And you know, holistic thinking may sound like gibberish, but it's really a comprehensive approach to how you address an issue, is looking at it from all the possibilities. So I think that it also brings in the community of being able to be participants in this, to think of the kind of community that people want to have and so forth. So I think has some interesting ideas in it and some possibilities. And if we start thinking about things in that broadest sense, I think it will become habit to think about things that way. You know, and even just having a statement that we want health in all policies, that says a lot, you know? So that's my 3 cents.
I'd like to read a paragraph from page 29 of this thing. Invest in tools and technical assistance. The ordinance and general plan language also require the development of tools to help government staff apply a health equity lens analysis to their work. The model general plan also encourages the development and use of tools that further ensure health is embedded in development, like healthy design guidelines and health impact assessments for large-scale developments. That is a whole paragraph that says nothing. It's just throwing phrases together for the purpose of throwing phrases together. You're being too kind to this.
Well,
You're being very nice to them.
If we look at a big development coming into town, and we have policies in place that say, no, you can't, you have to figure out a way not to remove 200 trees, because that contributes to our air quality, that contributes to our cooling our city, that contributes to our green space, it contributes to habitat for wildlife. In other words, if that's part of that development, that would be helpful. It would, if it was a policy, and I think that's kind of what we're doing when we're looking at the land development code and you know, seeing how we can tweak that to be a better solution than what's there now, make it better. So,
how is that different from a sustainability plan? And how does that add to what we're trying to do? Or what the good management of a city would ordinarily do?
But I think to me, like the specific example is when we widened the road that connects Mears out to 19, we didn't put bike lanes in. We didn't put a pathway where you could walk from that elementary school to people's homes. Because we don't have that inherently written in our city's policies that we're going to consider health as a factor when we're deciding projects, when we're deciding policies.
And
like
yet,
if we look at cool roofs is another example. That greatly reduces island heat. But we don't have, like, or when we put things out to bid for projects, like we look at cost, but there isn't anything written in that says that we're also going to factor in how this is going to impact the health of the community. So a health in all policies would also require us to look at how is this going to impact the health of the residents with this policy or this project, or like whatever it is that we're doing, we're going to have to consider the fact that this is going to impact people's health one way or another.
I don't think, from listening to everybody, that we're actually in disagreement. I think that, I mean, when you talk about widening the road and putting the bike paths in and the pedestrian walkways, that's very specific about what to do. And then there's a general policy, like you're saying, include health. I found the video, you know, I found it like it brought everything together that we've been working on. But I saw it and listened to it through the lens of all these details I've been reading. Like when we were looking at it, I said, oh, that's about this plan that we've been working on. You know, about there's actually actions that fit with all of these. And I think that a video like that's useful to sort of summarize, but unless you have all the other details, I think it doesn't say much, because you have to fill in the blanks. And so I think I mean, as most things, you need a general umbrella, and then you need the specifics to set out what, including health, what it means to have a health policy connected with everything we do. And I agree with Robin, and probably with everybody, that one of the most important things about the video is the sense of collaboration, that people have to talk to one another. For example, this is one of my bees in my bonnet at the moment. The county on Riverside and Chesapeake put in this big, walk thing where you can push a button and it goes all flashing and there's all these signs. I'll tell you, nobody uses it. And one reason is because it's always flooded there and you can't even stand there. And I walk across it with my dog a lot, and we always either go up, because you can't get to it either without going over this big hill where all the sewage stuff is, or walk on the road, which is always flooded or full of dirt and the cars are running you over. And if you go up further where you can actually cross without walking in the water, the cars stop anyway, or there's not any traffic. So if the county had communicated with the neighborhood, there wouldn't be this one cacophony of signs. The amount of signs going over that bridge, it's like every 5 feet there's another sign, which you don't need. So there's an example of in our city where lack of cooperation, lack of collaboration with the city, the county, and the neighborhood would have informed people that, you really don't need it. Maybe you could put a crosswalk, but, lines in the road. But that, I think, is the biggest thing. And if we could learn to cooperate and collaborate together, a lot of waste wouldn't be there, and we could get to specific and creative ideas.
Agreed. So I'm not sure how much support there is for this right now. It doesn't sound like everybody is wanting to add this in. So I guess we will.
What's the harm with adding it in? I don't see any harm. I don't think it's
Evil.
What?
It's not evil.
Yeah, I mean, some people will find it very helpful, and unless we want to parse our report down, but to have these things in an appendix is always, I think, useful.
Just one, it's aspirational. So it's like when it's looking farther down the road. So you mentioned the mirrors widening. So that was a need. That's how it was addressed. The county thought that was a need. That's how it was addressed. But if we're a walkable community, we know that a straight road like that encourages speeding and encourages, wildlife to get run over and all kinds of things. But it's not a comprehensive, cohesive policy that says, okay, and we also don't want to have, like at Safford and Live Oak, that's a raceway. If you just have a straight road and there's nothing else, it increases speed of traffic and pedestrians aren't as safe and things like that. So but that's looking that we're going to be living with this street for a long time. Mm-hmm. How could we make it to where it does work for pedestrians? It works for, people walking their dogs, but if an occasional animal wants to cross, they're less likely to get squished. But it's more aspirational, and I think more looking into the future of an aspirational goal rather than a concrete thing that we can do now. So it's how can we create policy that leads us in this direction? How can we look at things with a little bit of a longer lens? So that's all I'm going to say about it. That's 15 cents I just said.
Okay, so now I'm thinking we just leave it in based on hearing.
Can I just ask?
That's not health.
Can
Okay.
I ask for clarification?
Yes.
Are we looking, and I'm sorry because I feel like maybe this was answered and I'm just really confused. Are we looking to put the 42-page document into our sustainability action plan?
No.
Okay, that's what I thought. Like, as we're talking, I thought, no. Like, as I'm hearing this. So are we just looking to create a health and all policies statement to incorporate into our sustainability action plan?
Well, and we don't even have to write the statement now. It's all of these. We're not writing like the tree plan now. We're not writing the green plan now. We're just.
Okay, so for clarification, that's why I asked that, because if you had said, absolutely, we're looking to take this and just stick it in, which, there's no reason not to reference it maybe in the appendix if we feel that it's important as we kind of go through it. But is there any reason not to come up with some sort of health and all policies statement or small paragraph that we incorporate into that? Because to me, the overall purpose in that is it's pertinent and important, just based on some of the comments that are coming from the committee. So with that clarification that no, we're not looking to necessarily take, because I appreciate what you said when you're reading through this, and it's like, really? No, I don't agree that we need to put that in our plan, but I don't see a problem with putting a statement that we've all kind of sat and worked through that incorporates some of them, possibly, that's more pertinent to what we're looking to do.
Well, can we go back to the question that we stopped at last meeting, which was, do we put in action 10, which only got 3 votes, but Carol argued in favor of, and I have been convinced should be included as an education program, or should we substitute action 3? I think we should definitely include action 10. And I think our action 3 is not defined. If it is defined, it's not defined in what we've seen this far.
It's not defined. None of the plans that we are writing in here are defined. The whole point is you say we're going to do a plan, we're going to adopt a plan, and then that happens in the future. We're not writing a climate action plan right now. We're just saying we think the city should do it.
I would appreciate seeing both of them in at this point. And then as we get to defining that and looking at that a little more in depth, because I appreciate it. I was not here for it, but I did have a chance to watch the meetings before attending tonight, I appreciated your comments on that number 10 with the mosquitoes and all those other things. And I think at one point I had asked, because I know Pinellas County, if you call them, they'll come out and they'll spray for you, and they'll drop pellets, and they'll do whatever you need them to do for mosquito control. But we don't really do anything as far as our plants. What kinds of things are we doing to mitigate our own mosquito problems and things like that? So is there a problem with putting both 3 and 10 in at this point?
I don't have a problem with that.
So that we can kind of graduate from that and move on, and then as we are looking back, as we're starting to write this, and we look at that health and all policies statement, how do we cater that to what we need to do? I mean, if it's important enough to the committee, can we just add them both?
I'm fine with adding them both.
Denise, are you good with adding them both?
Well, and Dory, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So as we do this is not we're creating a product, but this product is going to be tweaked along the way.
Correct, because we haven't had any public input in this at all yet.
Right. So, like Karen said, it's like, this is where we're kind of going with it, and as we continue, we'll be able to see a little more clearly what makes most sense to put in there, how we don't want to be redundant, we want to be specific. But I really like that overarching health and all policies. I think it's important.
Okay.
If it helps, I think of this whole process, all of these objectives, it's like a big checklist. And what you're looking at is, what items do you think should be on this first draft of this checklist right now? We're not really trying to figure out how we're going to accomplish each of these things. It's really whether or not down the road, staff, leadership, the public are looking at this report and going down, it's presented in such a way you can review it and say, how are we doing on this item? Are we doing what we need to do or not? Do we still need this item anymore? Do we need a different item? So if that helps you at all in working through this, that's how I think of it.
So I agree that there's no harm to put both of them in there, and as we progress, we'll see what makes the most sense.
Okay. now moving on to number 4. Actually, it's health and community, so HS2, community health, local action 4, we also needed research that, to understand if we could restrict rental units from, or allow rental units to restrict smoking. So I don't know if the city
Are
attorney
we
had a
in-
chance to weigh in on that.
Where are we in HS what?
2,
2?
yep, action
Oh, okay.
4.
4, okay, got it. So we're in the same one.
I did reach out, I was not able to get an answer on that.
Okay, so we
What you
will
were interested in, Robin.
just table that one until next meeting again.
Did we answer the question of whether we were combining actions 9 and 11 and whether we were going to include them?
Yes.
Or is that still up in the air?
No, we've did that. All right. So, next is, we ended with HS3, Emergency Management Response. And so going on HS4, Food Access and Nutrition. Local Action 7 got 7 votes, so Local Action 2 got 7 votes. So Local Action 2 is adopt zoning and development regulations that allow farmers markets, community gardens, and other forms of urban agriculture. So that we'll keep in. And then item 11, Local Action 11 is support programs that enable healthful retail food outlets to locate in underserved areas, promote mobile vendors that only sell fresh food, or increase the mix of healthful food sold in existing establishments. And then there were none others that had more than half support for. HS5 is health systems. There were none of the local actions in that had majority support. The next section is HS6, hazard mitigation. That did have majority support for outcome number 2. So outcome number 2 says full community hazards, demonstrate a measurable reduction in.
Action number 3, right? 3 had 5 votes.
No, I'm looking at the top where it says outcomes.
Oh, outcomes, sorry, I was
that's
looking
okay.
at actions.
So
Got it.
outcome 2 had majority support. So that's demonstrate a measurable reduction in vulnerability and or increase in resiliency in existing community-wide hazard threats over time. And then for the local actions.
What does that mean?
I mean, I'm looking at it in terms of like for hurricanes, so we are decreasing the risk or increasing resiliency. So we're perhaps adopting right now we don't have a shelter in Tarpon Springs. So I think of things like that.
Okay.
So for the local actions, action number 3 had 5 votes. So that's established governance model between health department, local health care providers, community health organizations that supports local and regional collaboration for improving community health. And we may already do that, but again, that's one of those things where we'll just leave it in the plan and then we can decide later if we already have that collaboration. Action 1, 2, and 4 also received 4 votes. So action
Wait
1.
a second, action 3 is adopt land use regulations that limit development in areas of high hazard vulnerability.
Right, that's what I'm
Yeah.
reading.
Did you read
Okay,
that?
then I transferred wrong.
Yeah, you read the wrong thing.
Okay.
That is something that, you know, would beg the question of how do we work with the rewriting of the land development code and the comprehensive plan to limit development in such areas?
Well, I do know that there already are some state and federal requirements. We already do have things like this in place. To what degree, I can't speak to the specifics, but we do have federal and state backing on those types of things, and perhaps they need to be developed further.
I think that the Anklote Harbor development that was approved to go forward says that, yeah, we need to look at this area. And what, are there any teeth in the regulations that exist thus far?
And do we have a map of Tarpon that indicates which areas are high hazard vulnerability areas? I know we've looked at many maps. Have we looked at one that indicates that? Has the city specified any of that? That would be helpful.
There are maps at the end of the coastal element of the comprehensive plan that show the high hazard areas in yellow. I don't think we've looked at them specifically as a function of this committee, but yeah, they exist.
Well, that seems important.
All right, the next item is action 1, perform an all hazard vulnerability assessment, including key local hazards, impacts, and vulnerable populations and critical infrastructure, opportunities for mitigation, and business impact analysis. And then action 2 is develop a post-disaster plan that addresses long-range redevelopment issues such as land use, economic development, housing, infrastructure, public services, and environmental restoration.
That will be very controversial, but it seems, because typically what happens is people just rebuild. And it'd be an interesting time to put new restrictions on it, unfortunately.
Does this imply that we need to develop a group of post-disaster plans, assuming a hurricane of category 3, 4, or 5, a heat wave, a severe drought, and then kind of predict what kind of redevelopment the city will need to focus on after each of those disasters? That sounds like
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
what we're saying here.
Correct. Which I agree, it probably will be very controversial, so.
Well,
It'd be very
especially if
powerful
it's
and useful, too.
private property. So if my house were to be wiped out, you know, is the city gonna tell me I can't rebuild, or it's probably the insurance company that's going to.
FEMA might tell you you can't.
FEMA might, right,
FEMA
and they, like in the Keys, they're not building roads. They're basically telling you, if you buy that piece of property and you wanna build your house there, we're not gonna put a road to it, and we're not gonna maintain the road because it's going underwater, so. I mean, that's the
Well, and
reality of
even
it.
providing emergency services for those areas where they put other people at risk, the rescuers at risk, because it happens over and over again, so. Yeah, they're kind of just basically saying you're on your own if you're, in this scenario.
Well,
That
you
was
just
even the
mentioned
message
something,
during
you know,
Irma.
if it happens over and over again, what if it only happens once? You know, it's difficult.
Well, in other words, if it progresses, like if the storms are more frequent, if the flooding is more frequent, if sea levels rising is significant,
This kind of modeling of potential disasters can be really, really educational. And it could use up a lot of time, and it could, done properly, involve emergency medical services, the fire department, the police department, et cetera. I had the dubious honor of being responsible for staffing a trauma center of between 50 and 60,000 visits per year that was 12 miles away from the second largest cache of sarin nerve gas in this hemisphere. So we used to run drills on what happens when there's a major spill and we start getting hundreds, if not thousands, of people who have been exposed to one of the most deadly nerve gases this side of Novichok. And it's amazing what you learn when you run these kind of drills, because you get, if you're listening to the radio, you're getting ambulances saying, "I'm here, good buddy, where are you?" And you're getting the media involved because they've learned about it, and you get people who think that it's real, and they're showing up with the sniffles, and they're flooding your trauma center, and there's nothing wrong with them, and they're not part of your drill. They're not one of your pretend victims. And then you find out that there's not enough atropine in the whole county or enough prelidoxime in the whole county to treat the and it's very, very interesting and educational when you run these kinds of mock drills. This could occupy, pretty good amount of time, but it would be, just for the hurricane, it would be, I bet the Florida Hurricane Hub has information on how to do exactly this kind of thing.
I also think that USGS in St. Pete has a lot of models for what's going to happen, projected with sea level rise and what land is going to be flooded, and they could be a good resource, sort of thing they do.
Do we know, does the city have any type of post-disaster plan at all? This is, I chuckled a little under my breath. I was like, this is the perfect subcommittee type of, like you need a committee that is writing, we obviously are not writing a disaster plan, a post-disaster plan. I think it's important that the city have one, but do you know, Paul? Do we know who to ask? Do we have one?
Yes, we do. There's a few different types. There's one specific to hurricanes, and we practice it every year, and it involves how to recover, after the storm is through, how to prepare ahead of time, complete with timelines. And our police and fire are heavily involved in keeping that up to date. And then there's another one called a continuity of operations plan. It's abbreviated as COOP. And that's a more general plan for different types of disasters, not just hurricanes. So yes, we do have those plans in place. I wouldn't say it exactly goes into that long range, how would we rebuild the city and change the zoning. I think that's a little farther looking than what we have, but yes, we do have plans.
Do you know, does it include like environmental restoration? Like, I think that would be, important to our committee is, as well as the infrastructure, the housing and public services and things like that, but does that include?
It's primarily aimed at keeping us running and getting us back up to full capacity as safely and quickly as possible.
So it's just really an emergent, the first step
Of preparing and
the
recovering.
post-disaster. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
All right. So then the last section in health and safety is Hs7 Safe Communities, and for the local action, Hs4. I'll make sure that I didn't copy the wrong thing too before I'm reading it. Hs7. What I have is adopt local building codes or enforce state building codes with heightened standards. Is that? But that's not
No,
it.
develop partnerships
Sorry,
with
guys.
local agencies, nonprofit organizations, schools, and residents to implement public safety strategies, enforcement programs, and trust-building initiatives. So basically, collaborate with all the partners.
Very good. Thank you. I fixed it in the chart now, so.
The question about, I mean, in this document, there had been mentions of schools a lot, public schools. And my experience with public schools is they really stick to themselves. They don't seem to collaborate with other groups.
Yeah.
Or they're extremely reluctant to. They have their own board, they have their own system, and, you know, so it'd be good if they did.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this is maybe not specific to Pinellas County where, you know, in Florida, the districts do have more autonomy like that. But I think that there is ways to address the school board instead of, you know what I mean? I think you're right. You would have to address the board instead of going to the schools. I don't know that they.
Or I guess you could work with PTAs, because PTAs are more community focused.
All right, any other comments or discussion on health and safety? All right, then moving on to the follow-up from the presentation to the Board of Commissioners from May 25th. Thank you to Paul and to Carol for coming and co-presenting.
Oh, we just stood there. Oh, I pushed the button.
You did. You were an integral part of
But
that
you did
presentation.
a brilliant job.
So what came out of that presentation, the commission was, you know, obviously appreciative that we gave them kind of an update. They were also asking us to create a, well, there was discussion around two things. One is the full-time position and how they wanted more details in addition to the job description that we attached as part of the backup. And then they also wanted a list of sustainability items. So when they said, you know, you're asking to fund, what does that mean? So I didn't want to speak in behalf of the whole committee and say, like, these are the top 3 things. This is what we're, you know, this is what we want. So I asked that we could bring it back and have that conversation about, and we could like prioritize and give them ballpark figures for some of the costs for what we're thinking.
I looked to see if I could find the description, the job description, and I haven't found it. So could it be sent out to all of us? I couldn't find it on the website, or I didn't know where to look.
For sustainability coordinator?
Yes.
Is the backup still like live? If you go to the commission, to the regular session meetings?
We're gonna check.
Okay.
Okay.
There probably isn't a description within this community, right?
Well, there's,
I mean,
we
we've talked
provided them a
about it, but
backup, and then, so these are the slides that's in the
I did watch
backup.
it, it was excellent.
There, it's there, it's right after the slides.
Okay.
So if,
After the slides?
so if you go to the City of Tarpon Springs website, and then you go to the agenda, the commission agenda,
Wait a second.
okay?
Why don't I have, internet? Okay. There we go. Okay, and I go to Board of Commission agendas.
And then scroll down, and then it has the May 25th regular session. That's a link. If you click on it, then it pulls up the entire 209-page backup. They're not printing these, are they?
You should be able to scroll down, I believe, too, and click on them individually.
Okay, sustainability,
So if you scroll, just, yeah, I mean,
going.
the slides are there, and then right underneath
Okay.
it, there's the Excel spreadsheet with salary range, and then the St. Pete Sustainability and Resilience
I
Director,
see it.
right there. Okay, so,
And can I copy this? I guess so.
You can
huh?
do a save as. And you
Save
can
the whole thing?
you just take a
Download it.
screenshot
just
of
save
it.
that item.
Okay, we can
I
maybe
can
do
do
that
it.
next, like,
Don't worry.
offline. So what I want to have a conversation around is the proposed funding. So what I started, just to try to get us to a point of conversation for tonight, is I made a spreadsheet of and I literally just copied the verbiage from the action plan, the items that we've already said that we want, the local actions that we want in. And then Paul highlighted the 3 that we've already asked the Board of Commissioners to fund. So we have already provided them those 3 items. The first is the Urban Forest Management Plan, $75,000. The vulnerability, the climate risk and vulnerability assessment and action plan, $200,000. And then the greenhouse gas emission baseline and reduction action plan, $200,000. Like when the mayor had asked us for this months ago when he was going to the state to advocate for funds for the city. And we had highlighted those 3 things. And like I said, I just started pulling from the spreadsheet. We were highlighting things in blue that were like, make a plan, that would be like big ticket items that would cost money. So I just started pulling those from what we have agreed on. But we haven't even gotten through economy and jobs, equity and empowerment, education, arts and community, and the built environment. So we still haven't really even gotten through.
And do we have this spreadsheet?
Yes, this was part of the backup as well. Wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the second email I sent, I believe, but I can resend it too.
So I've created a little framework here for conversation, open it up for discussion.
Actually, this was not included, so I will go ahead and send this out to you guys.
Yeah,
Okay,
we just
thank
finished it up today, so it was not, it was too late to put in the backup.
I thought that the first one did go, though. No?
This is
Maybe
from
not.
start to finish.
I'm looking right now.
Sending it now?
I'm just looking up to see what I had sent, but I can send it.
So off the top of my head, one of the first things I thought of was the climate, or the climate risk and vulnerability assessment. You already got that up there. And then another thing was maybe getting with the group. I didn't know like dollar amounts of how much this type of thing would cost, but getting with the group that's trying to buy the West Colostrum Preserve, and maybe we can turn it into a park or something like that, or like they can turn it into a conservation easement or something, I don't know, but somehow getting involved with that. But there's already, so like where the develop a plan to restore, maintain, and monitor, like under section 6, something like along those lines.
Yes. So develop the plan. So that would be to try to evaluate like what properties and then create a fund to start doing that.
I don't know how much how much that property would cost, but
Thinking more than what they're considering for this request,
Probably.
but I think that like that's part of, you know, when we're saying like fund sustainability, like this is what we're talking about. Like
Maybe
we need to start.
contribute like 10 grand to it or something just to help them out. I don't know.
And what was the amount that many of the sustainability coordinators are paid, and how come that wasn't included in the list here? Was it in the list, or I missed it?
There's two separate items. So there's
Okay.
the item of funding a sustainability position and creating a job description. So at the meeting, Commissioner Vaticiotis made a motion to direct the city manager to create a job description.
Right. Yeah, I did see him, watched.
So that's the one item. And then what we are working on now is the second request, which is, what do you want funded? You say fund, what do you mean?
So we're just
And is it
we're not
one time?
including-
Is it, because the number that was put out was $100,000, correct? That was like or did I just dream that up? That was the amount of, what would you do with $100,000 as a suggested amount, or is that right?
I think you're right.
That number was mentioned, yes, by a
Okay.
commissioner as an idea of an order of magnitude.
All right, so that gives, because it's hard to say, what do you want? Well, I don't know, how much money do I have to work with? But
Exactly.
my question is that for this year's budget? Is that for every year's budget? Is this a starting point that we're going to start growing this fund for our long-term purposes and goals? So I didn't really know the context of it. I liked Taylor's idea of putting it towards acquiring green space or some type of a plan to, like, create new habitat in unused city lots or unused lots that people don't want to build on. And, you know, it's like the land trust that was developed up in Arapika by purchasing little properties and creating a connected green space. So I don't know how possible that is in our city because it's so built out, but it seems that we could do something. But then there's also the maintenance of it. So it's like with the Keystone Preserve, that would be great, or the Keystone, you know, the possibility of that. But who are the other players, and how much would they want us to contribute, or how do we express our interest in purchasing that? And, you know, I mean, it's a lot of ask, but I don't know what exactly is being asked.
So, I mean, to me, like, I think we should give them this entire list and like have it ranked, but say like, look, like
There's a whole bunch of things.
there's a whole bunch of things. And the part of the ask of the position too is to find funding to make some of this stuff happen so that it's not coming out of the city budget inherently, that it's coming from other places.
Well, I think it's, maybe short-sighted is not the right word to use to say, what would you do with $100,000? And maybe that is the right word to use. I think going in with things cost money. So, you know, I appreciate you giving me 50 cents to go to the candy store to buy a candy bar, but they cost $1.50. So I think going in with your justification and for what things cost and things like that, kind of, you know, it's not fair for them to, it's a fair question, what would you do with $100,000? But things cost a lot more than $100,000. So it's going in and showing them the value and the cost and the value of what you're getting for that cost is important. And you're not going to get what you're not asking for. So if you don't go in with your ask, you're certainly not going to get it. So I think you present $5 million plan and say, here's my ask, and see, you know, because I think part of our job is is education, and they're not going, you know, the commissioners are asking, what are your wants, what are your needs? So I think we need to tell them what our wants and our needs are, and you know, those things cost money, and they're in their budget planning session and things like that. So what do we want in the budget? And you're not going to get everything you ask for, but you're certainly not going to get something if you don't ask for it.
And some of the most urgent concerns, I think we're going to have money that comes from not the city, but from a lot of different sources, like floodwaters.
FEMA.
Yeah, and you know, all of I mean, that is the biggest concern. We live right next to the water. The water is rising. We have a chronic issue with flooding. But do we have the funds to address that within the city? We don't. But a sustainability director, coordinator, manager, whatever you want to call that position, is going to be obligated to work with all the resources that are available to address some of the most pressing concerns. And that's, to me, the #1 priority. But I think that the flooding is one of the biggest issues, but I know that the money will come from a lot of different sources. It just has to very creatively be pulled together by somebody who has the connections and the ability as a city, as a representative of the city, to pull those things together.
Well, we do know that the city's working on a big plan to, looking into seawalls for a way to mitigate all the flooding in the docks. The commission's been talking about that. It seems one thing to think about is, since the federal government will be passing some sort of big infrastructure bill, what the details of it are still being worked out, but we do know that, or at least we hope, that Tarpon will get a percentage of it and will be applying for it, that it would be good to have a suggestion about some project that would fit under that, to encourage the city to pursue those federal funds. I guess they are given to the state, and then I don't know exact procedure, but we do know there's going to be money eventually coming through for infrastructure. So it seems like we should have at least one project connected with that.
That's exactly what Karen Bolter and I were talking about when we presented to this committee last November, called the Whitcomb Bayou Project. And you were not on the committee at that time, but basically it was, look, here is the projection for flooding along just this part of this one bayou out of 7. This could be the model for how we fix the problem of flooding throughout the city, and there is this pot of federal money called the BRIC program, which is $500 million in 2020. Dr. Bolter and I presented again to the Board of Commissioners the same information that we presented to the board on April 13th of this year. The difference is that now the pot of federal money under the FEMA BRIC grant is $1 billion. Because the way the law is written is that it's earmarked 6% of what FEMA spent on disasters in the preceding year. And the preceding year included COVID and all the wildfires in California and the West, et cetera. So now we thought it was going to be more than $1 billion, but it's $1 billion. And each grant application can be up to $50 million. So the city of Tarpon Springs, if it chooses to, can apply for a federal grant for $50 million to erect whatever, living shoreline, man-made structure, or a hybrid structure that includes both living structures and man-made structures to prevent flooding along the shores of that bayou, and use that as the model for fixing the problems with flooding in the rest of the city. Now, it's a 75-25% match. Where does the city come up with a 25% match if they apply for something that big? Well, there are a lot of ways to do it. But what I was just in a webinar yesterday put on by a new organization that I'd never heard of, but they were instrumental in getting a bill passed in the Florida legislature this year, actually two. One was HB 7019, I believe, but it now runs under the Senate bill, which is SB 1954. That, and I haven't read the statute yet. That's my next, that's my next homework. But it was unanimously passed by the Florida legislature, and it's called the Always Ready program. $600 million in grants, et cetera, for municipalities, for county government, and also, according to the person in Department of Environmental Protection, also regional resiliency coordination entities can apply for these grants. And right now it's $600 million. It's going to grow over time. But there's your match. So you apply for the state grant and you apply for the federal grant and you use the 25 to match the 75, but you have to have a plan. What are you going to do on Whitcomb Bayou? Are you just going to put a boardwalk on top of the riprap? Or are you going to build a berm? Or are you going to build a living seawall? Or are you going to build a living shoreline? That's still up in the air, and that was discussed at the last Board of Commissioners meeting. Whereas Bob Robertson and Doug, and I can't think of his last name, from Cardno presented 6 different kinds of, was it 6 or 5? I think 6, of proposals of how to build a boardwalk. Contrast that with what Arcadis and I are saying, which is build a living shoreline. And this is what you apply for in terms of grants.
That would be wonderful, because to have a model of what to do all around the city. For example, our neighbors built a seawall, and they want to have mangroves, but the water is so deep now next to their seawall that, and there's no mangroves because they were basically gone. So how do they do that? How do they plant anything in front of their seawall when the water's so deep now? So, you know, it'd be great to have a model for everyone in the city of how to do either a living coastline or the combination, as you've spoken about.
There are 2 ways to do it, basically. There are a lot of variations on those 2 ways. But basically, there's a way to convert the space in front of their seawall into a living structure. But there's also a way to bind structures below the water level to the actual seawall that later colonize with organisms that filter the water and clean the water. So there's a dichotomy of how you approach that.
But I mean, I can't see your list, so I really can't tell if what's being spoken about fits in any of your categories.
Well, I mean, I think it fits into having that climate risk vulnerability assessment, like doing an overall plan of like what needs to happen first, second, third, to be able to make it sequential. But we could, I mean, we could just add it in as a separate thing as well to, however you want to word it.
I think that's important and it's timely and
I mean, that's
seems
something
to
that
be
they're already
money.
considering, so we could just
Right.
say like, yes, like, do it.
But
Or-
is the city going to go ahead and actually make the grants? Are they moving to do that? Paul, do you know?
The city manager was charged with coming up with a plan on how we move forward with this question. With, what do you do with the South Spring Boulevard and the eastern border of Whitcomb Bayou? And and the motion was made by Vice Mayor Carr, and the motion said, he directed him to work with Turn the Tide and work with this sustainability committee to come up with a plan on how we move forward.
Has he approached this committee?
He has not approached Turn the Tide. I don't know if he's talked with Dory or Paul. They gave a rough timeline of 2 months.
Is there a deadline for applying for the money?
The time frame on applying for the BRIC grants, it would be nice if if the grant was being written now,
Yeah.
because it's got to be submitted from the municipality to the state probably by November 15th. Don't quote me on that. That's what it was last year. So if you're going to write a grant, you know, you pretty much got to have a vulnerability study to back it up. Then you've got to be able to show, looking at timeline, what are the projections for flooding? Historically, what's the problem with flooding? So time is moving forward, and it would be nice if the city was actually working on the
I think this
vulnerability
is a
assessment
really
and the
great-
actual writing of the grant to the state and to the feds right now.
This would be a really good project, because it's specific, it fits the general request, and it's all about, I mean, this is what Tarpon's about, flooding.
Well, it also, I like what you said, Paul, about it would be the first one, because we're gonna have to address this with all the bayous and everything, so it's like creating a model that could be duplicated or modified for the other bayous going forward, so it's like a good starting point.
Yeah, and the nice thing is that FEMA is looking to create partners by having this money available that they can move forward with. Like, they know that if a municipality applies for a grant, it's probably not the last time they're gonna hear from that municipality. They want to create partners that they can fund over a period of time to fix the problems. They know it's not gonna be one problem, but they know historically that they've gotta get out of the vicious circle of having a disaster and paying to rebuild, and having a disaster and paying to rebuild. And they know that in general, every dollar of prevention saves them $6 after the fact. Well, for stormwater and for et cetera, it's more like 31 to 1. So it's a huge differential. And if they can just break the mold of, oh yeah, there goes Mexico Beach, let's rebuild it. They can save a lot of money in the long run.
All right, so just in interest of trying to get this wrapped up tonight, I would like to add that in as a separate item. What do you want to call it?
Whitcomb Bayou Project.
How much is an estimate of what Arcadis gave?
I think it would be 50,000. But Arcadis has not given a specific amount because they don't yet have a specific question.
So it's $50,000 just to do the analysis?
I think the analysis is 15 grand, but I'm not really the right person to ask. Karen is the right person to ask. But I think 50,000 would cover
Let's
it.
just round, because we
Say
got to
50
get something
grand.
on paper, right?
Yeah, I mean, you
Okay.
got to do the vulnerability assessment, and you got to write the grant.
Well, we have the vulnerability assessment already as item number 9. Conduct a local climate risk and vulnerability assessment. And we already have plans from the state to get grant money. And we've been, was that in the backup as well, Paul?
No.
No? Do you want to give a brief where we're at with the state with that grant?
Yes.
Or can we not do that?
Yes, I've been communicating with the state, and they're supposed to announce in July if we've won the grant. We've been called a preliminary awardee of the grant, so I'm hopeful that's gonna come through for us, but they're very cagey about announcing it until they work through their budget finally, but supposed to have something by July, and then we've got a pretty short time frame, within a year, I think, to get everything done. But that'll be a comprehensive vulnerability assessment through all the shoreline in the city. And so that'll be going in parallel to any grant applications that we're working on for that specific Whitcomb Bayou project.
Okay, so we leave them in as separate items, correct? I mean, that's my thinking. Oops. You guys okay with that? Okay. So I would like to, because we have a ranking mechanism with this, so I'd like to conduct the climate and vulnerability assessment as 1, because we've already started it, and we're already working towards it. And then, do we want to do the Whitcomb Bayou as 2?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and then, so those are like adaptation measures. We're looking at mitigation efforts, the greenhouse gas emission baseline and reduction action plan. I'd like to rank that as 3rd.
Can I interrupt for just one moment? I'm sorry. Would it be best if I maybe printed this out for you guys? I can go run and do that, or I can email you right now so you guys can see what she's looking at.
Email.
Email.
You got it.
That'd be great.
Another thing I was thinking of having it added on to that list is just hiring a sustainability officer, because they could do a lot of that work of like you were saying, finding the funding, and they'll be here every day, like working on it, instead of us meeting once a month and kind of doing it in our spare time.
I agree with that.
Yes.
Okay, so maybe make that number 3. Do we want to make that number 1 to like this is really like where it starts, or do we want to make that 3?
I think it's number 1.
I think it's 1.
I think if you have that person in place, they're taking on that load.
Okay,
of-
I'm renumbering 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna pause so that Ashley can send you guys so that we're all looking at the same
Just
thing.
about 30 seconds more.
And you're not seeing it in real time when I'm right, because I don't think I can't change that in real time, so.
Okay, you should all have it.
There we go. Thank you. Aha.
And I'm just gonna put 75 for hiring a sustainability director.
Is that reasonable on average?
I'm just, I don't know that would be like the actual salary, but when you factor in like benefits and all of that, the
Sure.
cost to the city.
Yep.
Oh, yours is over there. How much did you say?
75.
Yeah.
I mean, we could say 100, I'm just.
Just ballpark, yeah.
Maybe we'll put a range.
Yeah. Well, even the sustainability coordinator job description that you had a range of a minimum to a maximum.
Right.
So a range is probably appropriate.
I also think that we need to have a budget to do the outreach. And that one of the items is sponsor activities to increase ecological literacy and knowledge about natural resource protection. So that was just one of them, but we've got education components in all of the different goal areas. So, before we can do that education and outreach, we also are going to need some kind of budget to meet with community and do that community outreach to make this plan happen. So, do you guys agree with that?
Yes.
Say this again, education thing is?
So if you look at item number, row 7, talks about sponsoring activities to increase ecological literacy and knowledge. But before we do that, underneath, it's got public engagement. So I think that we need to be asking for money to do the public engagement.
What type of public engagement do you see as needing funding? And how, I'm not, when we did the public engagement, are you talking about like a connecting with someone to do an engagement process with the public? Or when we did the outreach before with the public, it was kind of just done in-house, wasn't it, Paul Smith?
Yes, working with the UF group.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know, and did that cost any money?
It didn't. They actually had a grant.
Right, okay, that's right, I recall. So I don't know if that is gonna be necessary. Maybe it will be, but maybe it won't, I don't know.
I was just thinking in terms of like having an in-person event, because we couldn't do them in person because of Zoom. So if we needed to like have space, I guess we could use city facilities and that wouldn't cost anything. But also, some of better, like best practice is like being able to offer food or, you know what I mean, at the meeting. There's no money to pay for food to have at the meeting.
Well, I think that what might be interesting would be to have stipends for people who are community members to encourage them to attend.
I agree.
And childcare available, something like that, because that's, if you have something where there's food and childcare and make it easy for people to attend, they're more likely to engage, rather than the same people who have the time and the resources to come to things. So,
Well, what's an example of what this engagement would be?
well, there's several different.
So when we've gone through this whole entire exercise of putting our recommendations, we're going to need to get community feedback on these, like, or is the community in alignment with the things that we've selected as priorities, or do they see other priorities that we may not see because, there's in the next in the section on, health and safety, for example, safe communities. My neighborhood's really safe. That's not an issue. It's well lit. That's not a concern for me. So. But maybe it is for other members of the community that really want to prioritize that and want that in the Sustainability Action Plan. So to me, we need to get community feedback on what we put out there for these different priorities.
So like a big community charrette where people come together and they get to express their views and.
Maybe, probably education component in that as well, to get people on the same page of understanding what we're talking about, but then asking them to let more laser focus to their own communities. Because like you said, a lot of people don't think Tarpon is a safe space, isn't a safe place. Some people think it's the safest place in the world, It just depends on your lens and your perspective. But I do think that if we want broad community engagement, we have to figure out a way to really support that effort, because people it's challenging for many people to do that.
Right. Yeah, and that's my point of wanting to have a budget to have public engagement, to be able to pay for maybe one person there that has a childcare room or something like that, or however we work it, and food and trying to encourage people that.
Or even just printing flyers or having somebody work on the website.
And you need to have a facilitator someone who conducts it. You got to put a really good PowerPoint or something together. There's a lot of costs involved in putting on these types of things, and you probably have to have several of them.
Agreed.
I've been to a number of those in St. Pete when I used to live there, and they were in some ways effective, but one thing they were effective was bringing the community together and the community talking to one another. And it was good.
Big.
Okay, so
Dory?
we've got 5 minutes.
Yeah, I was just gonna tell you.
Yep. So would somebody please make a motion to extend the meeting?
Motion to extend the meeting.
Second the motion?
Second. Oh,
I think
think
Denise got the
Denise did.
second. Yep.
Denise?
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so, looking for some, I mean, are you guys okay with making that, like, the fourth item is engaging public engagement techniques, funding that? Or is there something that you guys would rather see as, like, this is more important?
So one, just quickly, sustainability manager, number 1, what was number 2, assessment of?
The, row 9, the conduct the vulnerability assessment?
Okay, vulnerability assessment, and then the third was Whitcomb Bayou
Correct.
project, and I think that that ought to be it after the community engagement budget. You know, for a series of discussions.
Well,
I kind of liked Karen's idea, though, of like giving them a real long list of like the things
Like
that.
if you put if you prioritize them,
Right.
but you give them, you know, food for thought, you know, just, you are not gonna get what you don't ask for. I'm sorry, you know, and I agree, you can go in and be really ridiculous, and you can be asking for the world, and then nobody's gonna take you seriously, right? So I think if you limit if you've got your top 10 with your priority being number 1, if you go in with 4 things, and they're like, we'll give you 1, you know,
Yeah,
but you come in
I don't want
with
them to glaze
10 things.
over either, just thinking, oh my gosh, you give them an inch and they're gonna take a mile.
Well, they
But-
asked.
Yeah.
They asked,
Yeah,
what are the items that, and if you highlight and prioritize, and you explain that this is our list and this is how we've prioritized them because we feel that, you know, these are the most important things, the best way to go about moving forward as a committee. But I think you can put way too many things in there, and then you're just kind of being, you know, nickel and diming and saying, you know, everyone, you know, you've got a list of 50 things, and then it's too
Well, we
much.
call it an initial list.
yeah. Yeah.
Well, and you're also
Starter
looking
list.
for this budget year, right? And so we're not looking for the sustainabilities, the committees items indefinitely. We're looking for this budget year, what can the commission look at for their fiscal year, their budget year? So if we're looking, we're gonna want this, but we know we're not gonna be able to tackle this for another 3 years or what have you, then it probably shouldn't, you know, it could be tucked away so we remember it, but it doesn't necessarily need to be in our ask for right now.
Robin?
Yeah, and I was wondering about how promptly that if it's for this budget year, then community engagement might not be for a year out when we finish this, you know, and get ready to engage. I mean, I don't know what the timeline is to engage people in the community. If vulnerability assessment is more immediate, so if we're looking in terms of this budget year, which ones on the list would be a more priority? To me, that community engagement piece is huge. The vulnerability assessment, it's huge, but I'm also wondering if there's some other parts of the city budget that might apply to that as well, you know, that might be able to contribute to that.
I think that if I requested this, I would like to see, one, things like you're saying that would apply to this year's budget, but I'd also like to get let me get a bigger picture and see where they're going and what we should start thinking about and planning for. So I think that this idea of putting in a fair amount of requests, it's sort of part of a plan, not necessarily that you're going to get the funding right now, but here's the things we need to think about, and they work together.
Well, then if we're requesting some funds for Whitcomb Bayou, I mean, I think that the sponge dock area is equally important, so. would
They're
we-
already focused on the sponge docks.
Okay,
yeah.
so
We're trying to get
that's-
them focused on the Bayou system as well.
Then, on this, from this list, greenhouse gas emissions, assessment, a baseline and, assessment, so that should be on there if that, and that has a budget that's associated with that, that needs to be in there then.
I would agree. So
think
I'm just wondering if we should do the greenhouse gas emission baseline plan, because to me, like, the outreach is gonna need to happen this year.
Yeah,
So that needs to be in like this year's budget.
then I think maybe prioritize that higher, and, but also, I like what Karen and Carol said about putting things in there that are food for thought for the future, that it's not once this list is done, then we're good. It's like, this is a long-term thing. I really like that as well.
And I
Making
really
it a
like the
robust
idea
list.
of putting in, looking at these green spaces to save. And that's a big topic now that lots of communities are going after. So I think it's something there's a listening for. And I think Tarpon really needs to be thinking about how to expand the green space that we don't develop. So I would like to put that in. I also made a list. Did other people make a list? I made a list, short list. Ashley hasn't.
I only received a list from you and Dory.
So, okay, so I'm thinking we want to put 1, 2, 3, we have 4 is the public engagement. Maybe $5,000, does that seem reasonable? And then we already have the baseline as an ask, so I don't think we should put that too much further out.
Which one?
I'm sorry?
Which one?
The greenhouse gas emission baseline, the ones that are highlighted.
I think that one needs to happen for us to move forward, putting our plan together, because if you don't have the baseline data, you don't know where you're going. So yeah, that's a tough one for me on where to rank that.
Okay, so are we in agreement that's 5th?
Yep.
Okay, and then do we want to look at the urban forest management plan or the plan to restore and maintain natural lands?
Natural lands.
Okay, 6. So what we have left is the green infrastructure plan, which to me is like Whitcomb Bayou, but expanding out to like on the land too. Like, how are we dealing with all of the water? Like, to me, that needs to be addressed.
I have one on my list that addresses that.
What did you say? I'm sorry.
On my list.
Okay.
What is it?
It's up on the,
Do you want me to pull up your list
yeah,
on screen?
sure.
Okay.
I mean, these are more specific things.
What I did was I literally just took the verbiage that we have all agreed on
Gotcha.
for the sustainability action plan items.
I see. You know, Dory, when you're talking about the urban forest management plan, our existing tree ordinance already has, I think, some flexibility with that, where that might be able to use some of the tree bank funds.
Okay. So I think we should indicate
At least
that.
look at that, because I think there's a broad use of what that money can be used for. And if not, the ordinance can also, it's a possibility to strengthen that ordinance.
You want me to read them?
Yeah, do you want to go through them?
Sure. Okay. Investigate growing seagrass in the bayous. Perhaps we need to scrape the sludge. People have been talking to me about this, and they said if we scrape the sludge from the bayou's bottoms, lots of things would grow, like seagrass would grow and things. But the way the bottoms of the bayous are now, that's not going to happen. This will create a healthier water system for us and all the life in our waters, namely manatees and Tarpon Springs' identity is based on our waters. So our bayous are in really bad shape. And I know that they've just gotten a grant to do the dredging of the include, but if we could somehow restore the life of our bayous, that would be a major thing for sustainability.
What you can do, and add to this list, Carol, is you can specify, or we can specify as a committee, the application of living seawalls in Spring Bayou. Because once you've created, and this is something that the sustainability manager of Sarasota presented to us more than a year ago.
Well, I live on Kramer Bayou, and I would
apply
like
three-dimensional structures to a man-made seawall, those will secondarily colonize with bivalves, which will clean the water. And that will also improve the water quality, and it'll improve seagrass.
I live on Kramer Bayou, and we have mangroves, but I'd like to plant seagrass. And I've talked to neighbors, and they said there's too much sludge. You know, it won't grow. So I think this is an important thing to investigate, how to make our bayous healthier. Okay, my second one is monitor the commercial boats to ensure they're not getting oil in their bilges and dumping it in the bayous. And there's evidence that this has been happening.
It is happening.
So it's illegal to do that. And the question is, what sort of enforcement can there be? Because if the oil keeps getting in the bayous, it's not good for anything. My second one is a small one, sort of. Create a depository for polystyrene foam and mealworms, because the mealworms eat the styrofoam. This would be good use by the city, restaurants, businesses, and residents. And these are some websites that show this being done. I was on an art and sustainability Zoom yesterday, maybe, or the day before, and this Terraform 1 has built one of these, a real wonderful art project. And people can get little compartments, and they can put their styrofoam in it, and there's a camera, and they can watch the mealworms eat the styrofoam. And then they can use a lot of that for compost after they eat it. I mean, this was raised about restaurants having all of this styrofoam waste. Well, this is a good way of, and this is doable. You know, it's probably wouldn't cost much money. You just have to build a structure, and you have the styrofoam connected from residents, from restaurants, the city, you know, all that packing equipment, and it's sort of a fascinating thing. So if you look at these sites, you can actually see them eating it. Oh, they're up on the screen.
Discovered a recycler of polystyrene. I wasn't aware that it was a recyclable item, but they actually densify it, and it has to be clean, obviously, and then they're shipping it and he said the demand is so high for insulation materials, and it's being remade into picture frames and the moldings that are in buildings. And, I mean, I would love to see it eliminated entirely. I think that, you know, public education might move people in that direction eventually, but until then, there is a place in Newport Richey I was planning on visiting next Wednesday just to see what their operation is like.
So building a collection site for styrofoam, I mean, you get a new
That's
appliance, you know, a TV or whatever, you get all the styrofoam, and it's like, I'm sure people would want to do it. I'm sure the city would get styrofoam and the restaurants. But Ashley, you can bring it, you can see the mealworms eating it.
That's a great project for the environmental science teacher at the high school. To have them get something into the classroom so that
Those are the
the
structures
kids
they
can-
use to put the styrofoam in. It was a big art project. But there is a picture of the worms eating
That's
the,
a great idea. Such a brilliant idea. I love that.
what was done at Stanford did a lot of the research into this. This was in Camden, Maine, but there's the mealyworms.
Would it be possible to have Dr. Mickett and Dory's items, like the emails that they sent to you, combined or sent to us so that we have those at some point?
Yes, I will send them to you.
Okay, thank you.
And mine was just what's already been sent.
Okay,
It was just the,
that
That
put
list,
together.
yeah.
Okay,
I
yeah,
just-
if we could get this, because then we can browse through it on our time and then do any other follow-up research that we want to do with it, so that'd be helpful. Thank you.
so could you go put the 3 statements back up, just so that I can, there we go. Okay, so my thought is to, like, the seagrass and the bayous, putting that into develop the plan to restore, maintain, and monitor conserve natural lands, but then just also say, like, and waterways. And then, like, specifically spell out that we want this to be part of what they look at, is the feasibility of seagrass restoration in our bayous.
Yeah.
think that
Restore
that's
the
a way
health
to-
of our bayous is
Okay.
what we need.
So let me make that note right now, so I don't. Natural
It'll
land.
probably help with erosion too. And,
Yes.
and the ecosystem.
Absolutely, to help everything.
They're building new habitat.
More fish for the fishermen.
More manatees.
Okay, so we got that. The second one, I feel like that just needs to be enforcement, and I don't know who does that enforcement, but I mean, if it's already against the law, then we just need to get somebody, like, actively enforcing it, right? I mean, I don't think that that's necessarily something that we need to ask them for money to do.
But maybe in terms of creating healthy bayous, we could say, monitor the spilling of, well, also waste, human waste. I mean, boats often just dump the human waste instead of going to get it pumped out. It just seems very much to me a priority in Tarpon that all our bayous and river are clean.
I'm just looking through to see if there's any of the others that are already kind of in here that would make sense to partner or pair it with. I mean, we do have, like, enforce or offer incentives to shift behaviors, to prepare for climate change, support development of renewable energy, but that's not really, well, it says, and also working toward community waste reduction targets. Robin?
Yes, just on a sidebar, The Florida Department of Environmental Protection has the Office of Resilience and Coastal Protection, RCP, and they work with other agencies to improve seagrass protection, augment habitat recovery through proven scientific restoration techniques, and increase public awareness of the importance of seagrass. So there's something at the state level that's already doing something that works with the seagrass. I mean, sometimes it's just connecting the dots, you know.
And maybe they give out grants to do this.
Well, then they talk about propeller scarring is one of the major.
What is it?
Propeller scarring. People running their boats over the seagrass, the propellers.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Anyway, and then well, you was seeing that at Sunset Beach. You can see where there's these cuts in there where people at low tide run their boats.
What is the DEP program called?
It's called, the acronym, or the initials rather, is RCP, the Office of Resilience and Coastal Protection.
So here's a good partner for collaboration.
Yeah.
Office of Resilience and
Coastal protection.
Coastal?
RCP, Resilience and Coastal Protection.
Okay.
Can you include Carol's number 2 as a number 6 type of item in that enforce regulations
The boats.
for the boats?
Enforce regulations.
It's like enforce regulations and offer incentives to encourage residents and businesses. Would that number 2 that you have fit
Yeah.
in that category, as you were kind of saying, where it's to restore the bayous, but it's also restoring the river, which feeds into your bayous and, you know.
Yeah, people are seeing it in the river, I think, is where everyone who's told me about that lives sort of rivery bayou.
So, I'm sorry, Karen, so you're saying under row 6, where it says?
No, I'm sorry, number 10, so row number 10, where it says enforce regulations or offer incentives to encourage residents and businesses to shift behaviors to prepare for future climate, but kind of take her number 2 item for monitoring the commercial boats, and stick it in as kind of like a number 6 item.
Number 6, thank you. Okay.
Sorry,
Good
yeah,
idea.
line 10, number 6.
Got it. So you're just saying add a 6 to that, and that would be monitor commercial boats.
Yeah, because I think it kind of falls within that realm of enforcing the regulations rather than creating another line item. Is that okay? Okay, I don't want to take away from what you're.
Okay.
Good one.
So okay, I need to shrink that.
I still want mealy worms. Mealworms.
So to me, that is like one of those sidebar committees that like Dr. Robinson's talking about, like you would take the responsibility of like heading that up and making that happen and like reporting back to the group about how we would proceed.
Well, get the Girl Scouts. They could have it.
Get the Girl Scouts.
Get the Girl Scouts. That would be a wonderful project.
What do you say?
The Girl Scouts.
Okay, so so we are at number 6, item number 6, in terms of ranking. So now we're going to 7. So do we want to put, what we have left is the urban forest plan, a green infrastructure plan, education and outreach, and then regulations and incentives to encourage businesses to shift behaviors. Strong opinions on the ranking of those? And we need to put figures by some of this as well, and I just have no idea. Other than the other plans have been around $200,000. Paul, any guidance or any ideas for us?
No, not really. I think that will really develop. They'll probably usually be done in phases where you do an initial assessment, outline what needs to be done, and then you get into the real details, which take time and money to finish out. But which one in particular, that green infrastructure plan?
Sure.
Yeah, I did talk to the consultant today before the meeting, and he thought that the 100,000 range would probably be appropriate for that.
Okay, thank you. And then any idea on a plan to restore and monitor, conserve natural lands?
Money figure? As much as we can.
Well, that's just to create the plan.
Oh, the plan. I don't know, what, 12,000? 15,000?
Urban forest plan is 75, so I'm guessing all of these that say plan are gonna have,
Yeah.
are gonna be closer, between 75 and at least 100. I mean, I'm just.
So the plan is cost more than a year's salary for a person? Yes? Wow.
It takes a team of probably 3 or 4 people to prepare it.
Okay.
And then it's the implementation. It's like, now we've got this plan, but we've got to actually do it.
Well, then put 75 down. So I would really like an item that talks about equity.
We haven't gotten there yet in the, that's why I didn't put it in there, but like, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying that like, I only added in here the things that we had gotten to. So like climate and energy.
So maybe we can make up one, because we're leaving out people. We're leaving out the sustainability of the human community. And it seems that should be in our initial ask.
But since we haven't gone through and like even looked at the objectives and the local actions, I wouldn't feel comfortable just like randomly coming up with some idea.
We don't have a line item because haven't gone through the line items.
We haven't gone through those lines yet.
Hey, Dory, what, real quick, when is this expected to be presented to them, like given to them? Like, when is their budget meeting and all that, like?
The budget process starts in July. They've got 3 budget hearings that are workshops, correct? And then they have 2 additional that are public meetings. Is it in the place of a regular commission meeting?
Yes, I don't have the schedule, but I know it is discussed in typically July, August timeframe, so the sooner the better.
So we would want to get this out. So I think that's going to be hard if we're meeting in July. Like, this almost needs to kind of be our first ask, and we get the money during this time period, and then we are much better prepared for the next budget season because we've walked through this. Yeah, because I think time is not on our side necessarily in this here, because this needs to get to them. If it doesn't get to them, then we get nothing.
Right. And one other thing I didn't think, and it just occurred to me, that maybe we should put something in for like I mean, we don't need to publish like a glossy thing like this, but there's gonna have to be a lot of edits and stuff, and I don't know if that's, like, if we should put in like a consultant or a whatever to put this all together.
You mean a graphic designer to put
All of it, I mean, like to edit it and put the sustainability action plan in a document.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily need to be printed, that's not necessarily sustainable, but even to put it in a digital format, like, do you think that we need that, or?
I do.
Within this fiscal year, do you anticipate?
Well, we should be done, like, July, we can cover economy and jobs, August, built environment, September, equity and empowerment, October, education, arts and community, and we've gotten through. So then it goes to like, I think, community input.
Right, yeah, I'm just trying to think of, fiscal year, will we be at that point at the end of that next fiscal year? And there's a great possibility that we will be. So, okay.
That
You
would
could
be
call
my,
it something like final production of sustainability action plan and put like 20,000 on it or something like that.
and I think we need to bump that up. Because we want that money for this year to be able to do it, right?
Right. Dory, before we leave this topic, we probably need to flesh out the wording of item 3, Whitcomb Bayou project, what we specifically are asking for.
Okay,
And that is that the city contract with Arcadis Corporation to write and apply for a FEMA, FEMA, BRIC, all caps, BRIC grant to, how I don't know how to say this, but what I want to say is to fix the problems of flooding and erosion along the shores of Whitcomb Bayou.
fix the flooding along the shores.
And
Now, we
erosion.
could just say.
I'm sorry.
The eastern shore of Whitcomb Bayou.
I thought that the, in the video, because at first Commissioner Carr was like, all the bayous. And
Yes.
then, right, and then they were like, well, how long would that take? And it would be too long, so then they narrowed it down to Whitcomb Bayou, right?
Yes. I would say to fix the problems of flooding and erosion along the shores of Whitcomb Bayou. Now, the caveat is that the county has jurisdiction over the southern and the western shores. I spoke with the chairman of the commission Tuesday, Commissioner Dave Eggers, about this, and he is interested in this concept. So I would just say, you know, we want the city to contract with Arcadis Corporation to write a grant to FEMA, a BRIC grant, to address, I think that's the proper, address the problems of flooding and erosion in Whitcomb Bayou.
All right, so what I have is Whitcomb Bayou project period, city to contract with Arcadis to apply to FEMA for a BRIC grant to address the flooding and erosion along the shores of Whitcomb Bayou.
Good.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, and then I apologize, the wording of getting this sustainability action plan, how did,
Final production.
final production? Thank you. And we said 15?
20.
I said 20, but then
20.
someone mentioned probably want to bump it up. It just depends how much, I know we're working with a consultant. I don't know if they've been selected yet for the strategic plan, and it might be a natural fit for them to make this part of their scope, to fold it in and finish it up.
Is it USF that's doing that?
I believe so. I think it's a collaboration with USF and SPC.
Who are?
What I can do is talk to the planning director, Renee Vincent, and help, she can help me refine that cost, but we'll start with the 20, but if it needs to be a little more, we'll put it in there.
Okay. So I'm gonna make that number 2, 3, 4, and bump everything back in terms of prioritizing. So this is now 5, this is now 6, this is now 7. Okay, then the last two things are education and enforce regulation, offer incentives, encourage residents to shift behaviors.
To shift what?
Behaviors.
Oh.
Nope, I lied, because there's still the green infrastructure plan and the urban tree forest management plan. So I would propose we just do the tree plan next as number 8, because we already had it originally in there as one of the things. And then 9 for the green infrastructure plan. For develop a plan to restore and monitor conserve natural lands, we don't have a price tag in there. Not sure.
call a few consultants and just ask for a ballpark, but
Is somebody willing to take that on?
what is it? Develop a plan to restore, maintain, and monitor conserved natural lands?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'll
Okay.
follow up some people.
I'm just gonna. All right. Activities to increase education. Let's just ballpark 50 for now. Put that in as item number 10. And then-
Education for what?
Ecological literacy, knowledge about natural resource protection, water quality, impacts of air quality, and to reduce pollution emissions and exposure. But there's other education components as well.
Okay.
And then the last one would be enforce regulations, offer incentives. And I think that this would just have a wide range because it depends on how much money you want to put towards the incentives. So I'm just going to write range. And I think we've got at
Okay.
least enough to get back to them.
So don't want to give up this equity thing. So action 1 in outcome 1 is conduct a comprehensive equity assessment for the community. Now, that's something I don't think Tarpon has or has looked at. So I think that that's would be a great thing to put in. Even though
I
we
don't
haven't
disagree
looked
with
at
you,
the
but I'm
whole
not ready
thing.
to do that tonight since we haven't had a conversation about that component at all. And I also don't know that, like, we're just showing them these are the ideas that we have. There's no way that they're gonna even get to half of these. So I'm at a point where I'd like to just wrap this up for tonight.
Yeah.
Give them this, and then that definitely needs to be an ongoing conversation.
We definitely need to have that conversation. I have like zero information to go on at this point.
I don't think we're in a position to, I appreciate it, and I do think it needs to go somewhere, but not having opened the entire outcomes and,
Okay.
action plans and things like that, I think that it's premature to just stick something in without.
But can we do this sooner than later? It just seems, when I look at the whole city, that this is a very important thing to do.
I completely agree. But, I mean, we're going through month by month and
What is our next?
Could it be addressed as soon as we finish that next section? That we, once we've all kind of started putting our priorities for the next section together, is exactly what you said is, okay, is there something that needs to go in to the budget regarding that? Like, is that way we've had an opportunity to discuss everything and figure out what the importance is, and then how to word what we want money for? Is that a fair way to go about it? I don't know.
so we're not going to get to equity and empowerment until September. So I'm just trying to,
Gotcha.
I
No,
mean,
I
we've
didn't
just,
realize it was that far
I mean,
out.
because I think that there's tons of stuff in climate and energy, in the built environment that need funding as well. And so, and that's not going to be addressed here. And I think we just need to give them that caveat that, like, we haven't even gotten through the whole thing.
Right.
So there's tons
is
of
our
other
initial.
things that need funding.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and we need to, for our own, I think, function, continue prioritizing budget items as we go. So that next year we've got this much more firmed up.
I just want to say one more thing about this. One of the things that people think about when you say sustainability is what we've been doing, looking at the natural world, looking at trees and water and air. But human beings, unless our communities are sustainable, how we live in community, unless that's sustained and that becomes part of this discussion, which I know it's going to, but I think that oftentimes when people talk about the sustainability, that gets pushed aside. And having been through this part of this conversation, not as long as all of you have, it keeps nagging at me that we haven't discussed this. And I won't say anymore.
We just haven't
Maybe.
gotten there yet.
Yeah, we just haven't gotten there yet. That just, because of the way the framework works, that was kind of, yeah.
Yeah,
And I appreciate you bringing that up, because it is important. It is
I appreciate you
a
bringing it up,
huge
too.
factor. Yeah, just.
And it's not lost on me. Like,
No.
we've done this exercise where, well, I have, where like I look at where does the city have capacity and have staff to be addressing each one of these. And the only category that there isn't a position at all that I'm aware of that the city employs someone to address is that category. So I completely agree with you. And I don't think that I think that we need to be looking at prioritizing funding for it. But for this, like, needing to get this like list of things, which I don't even know if we would even get to them funding to number 4. I think we need to, just put a bow on it for now and turn this in.
Dory, I have one thought. With this, so what we're doing with this funding is we're starting a conversation with the city about how we're going to be interacting over the next forever. And as we go through this list, I think it would be good where we have our immediate list here to say that we send them, as we process, we send them more things so that they understand how all-encompassing this is, and start to appreciate that this, as you said, that we're not through with this whole thing yet. We still have a ways to go with it, and here's what we've come up with. Let them know and send them those updates of what's important to us, or the priorities as we come to them. So in other words, this list, continue it as we continue to prioritize and think of it in terms of fundable things to send to the commission, just to have in their minds.
Tell them it's a working document.
Exactly.
Progress.
It's a working document.
Yes.
We'll be adding to it in the
Standing
future.
document.
Okay, so then I'll get with Paul to make sure all the notes that I took tonight are transferred over, and then that gets sent to the commission. The next item is the economy and jobs outline. So I'm just gonna say, for our next month, we need to be prioritizing the economy and jobs column. So if everybody please get to work on that. And then items for our next agenda. Item number 6, so we've got economy and jobs. And
Ashley, will you send us one of those forms for the economy and jobs so we can fill that out?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I don't think there was anything else that carried over, like natural systems we finished, health and safety we finished. So we're just going right into economy and jobs. Are there any other items that we want to have on next month's agenda?
If we've decided on pet projects or particular items that each of us wants to focus on, and, that we discussed at the beginning of this meeting, like the waste or the plants, maybe.
If anyone's ready, I don't know if I'll be ready yet, but.
Well,
If
not
I
that
just
we'd be
work
ready
on
to present, but just whatever we're working on, so it's not being doubled up by somebody else. I mean, if we have a particular item, and, Carol, for you, it might be, ideas around equity.
So
So we haven't gotten there yet, but conversations about what we're focused on, what we're putting some additional attention towards, finding solutions.
Okay, so
about-
a conversation on the,
Right, what areas we really
side.
feel passionate about.
Okay.
Spending time working on.
okay, that's good.
Nearly warm.
Do we want to try and smush together economy and jobs and the built environment, or is that really just pushing it?
We could definitely prioritize them.
Why don't we prioritize them and see where we get?
Okay, so let's, in the next month, try to prioritize, we'll definitely prioritize economy and jobs, and then start working on built environment.
Sure.
Sounds good.
Yep. Then we don't have to have it month by month, maybe we can just get it all done sooner.
Yeah.
Any other items? All right, then, public comments. No public comments. Staff comments.
None for me, Ashley?
Oh, no.
Committee comments? All right, well then, like a motion to adjourn at 8:39.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All
Paul,
right.
Paul,
Thank
did
you
you
all.
second? Who seconded? It
That was Paul.
was Paul, thank you.